Good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending this plenary session on reinventing energy. With the energy sector accounting for more than 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, the success of the transition will be pivotal in global efforts to tackle climate change. Key questions come to mind. Is enough being done to drive towards a low carbon future? What does true leadership look like within the transition? And how can we move from ambition to action? To dive into these topics, we are very lucky to have with us an exceptional panel of experts and global energy thought leaders. Please allow me to introduce them. Jean-Bernard Lévy, Chairman and CEO of EDF. Francisco La Camara, Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. Joe Kaiser, Chairman of Siemens Energy. And Patrick de Costra, President and CEO of Boralex. We're going to have opening statements from all the speakers, and then I will dive into some questions and what should be an action-packed 45 minutes. So to begin with, Jean-Bernard, will you start us off?
Good morning to everybody in the American continent, and good afternoon to those in Europe, like my good friend Joe. Nice to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me. Of course, the topic is a major one. Reshaping the energy sector is essential in fighting climate change. And I think we have really a lot on our plate. We have a lot to do. I would like first to say that we see climate change effects more and more every day, and we have to adapt the energy sector to climate change. We have extreme events, floods, cold waves, fires, and so on, which are accelerating. And maybe the first thing we need to do is to ensure that we are able every day to deal with these effects of climate change and support our clients and deliver them the energy, the electricity that they need. In order to do so, we have to anticipate and not only to manage in crisis. Just to give you a few examples, adaptation costs we feel are underestimated, and we spend more and more in order to do very concrete things to give more resilience to our power plants or to our grids in these extreme situations. Just to take a few examples, we are repositioning the water intakes in the glaciers or installing new spillways on the dams to adapt to the changes in precipitation patterns. And I think these efforts in anticipation are very important. Adaptation costs are underestimated, and we prefer to manage these issues today rather than have skyrocketing costs and damages to our business, but also our landscapes, our lifestyles, our economies, if we don't manage to avoid this. But more generally speaking, I'd like to say that we are very thrilled by the massive move towards decarbonized electricity, which is obviously the scientific and political consensus in our Western economies, starting with, but also more and more in the whole world's economies. The electrification of end uses on a massive scale will give a dramatic success, a dramatic push towards the success of net zero. To achieve carbon neutrality, electricity, which today accounts for roughly 20% of global energy consumption, will have to double or triple that share to more than 50 or 60% directly, and maybe an even higher share indirectly give you an example. If we account for the production of hydrogen to decarbonize some of the remaining 30-40% of our economies, we will need a lot of electricity, really a lot of electricity. And I find more and more people anxious and telling me, where is all that power going to come from? At the same time, we are not on track. The pace of electrification is not sufficient. It would have to at least double to meet the targets of the Paris agreements, Paris COP21. So we have to pave the way for a massive lock-in of fossil fuel usage, especially in transportation and in buildings. In that respect, we have to adjust a lot of the market rules. I would like to give 3 examples. The first one is we need to question the current taxation of energy. To rebalance it, we have to use carbon prices or carbon mechanisms in order to accelerate this move towards electricity. The second one is there has to be a lot of government-based policies targeting specific sectors. Just one which is on track, maybe, or at least which people are already taking care of, which is specific policies regarding electric vehicles. And my third point regarding market rules is I think time has come to revisit market design for the sale of electricity, of wholesale electricity. Market design was designed where most costs were variable based on fossil fuel prices, which, as we know, have been very volatile. But more and more, what we generate is based on renewables, which are, for really the large part of it, the vast majority of it is based on fixed costs, and mainly on the amortization of capex. So this cost base is totally disconnected from the fossil fuel prices and their volatility. And I think in the near future, in many countries or areas of the world, such as the European Union, revisiting market design will have to happen, especially as we see very high current prices. Maybe I will end by saying that as we have to massively run towards decarbonized electricity, we have to take advantage of all technologies. That has to include nuclear, hydro, which is often overlooked at, and of course, solar and wind. But regarding the latter, we see more and more difficulties based on acceptability issues. We've had that for nuclear in many countries for some time. We also have it more and more often on hydro. But I think there is no exception that as utilities, we have to take care, especially in densely populated regions like Europe, of acceptability issues, delays in project execution times. And we have therefore to be very ambitious, but also to be patient. Thank you.
Thank you. Francesco, your thoughts?
Coming. So, first of all, thank you, Alima. And fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here with you at this 27th edition of this important conference. And I'd like to focus in my short introductory remarks on the importance of moving from ambition to implementation in the context of climate goals and the energy transition. In this respect, I have to say that I share all has been just said from Jean Bernard, with the exception of nuclear, that I think will be not useful in this next decade, that will sign our capacity to be in line with the Paris Agreement. This is a pivotal moment in humanity. The high-level dialogue in New York in September, the COP26 in November, have been one of the last opportunities we have to put our economies on a path towards achieving the Paris Agreement goals. The IPCC recent assessment made the perilous nature of our current emission trajectory very, very clear. But through corrective action and a clear focus on the energy transition, we can stabilize global temperature and avoid the very worst of climate change and these irreversible consequences. It is important first to say the ambition we show is very encouraging, as has been just said. Over the last 18 months, we have seen countless organizations and countries around the world make commitments to a net zero future. 150 companies are said to have signed a climate pledge committing to carbon neutrality by 2040. And countries accounting for more than 50% of global emissions have now committed to a net zero future. Even more encouraging is that beyond the ambition, that there is an unparalleled concrete momentum. In 2020, renewable addition beat all previous records by a margin of 50%, despite lockdown measures and the challenges associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. The 260 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity added last year account for an 80% share of all new electricity capacity and reaffirmed the continued dominance of renewable energy in new capacity growth. Furthermore, given the dramatic cost reduction we continue to witness in renewables, I fully expect renewables not only continue this trend, but to increasingly wipe fossil fuel out to the new power generation discussion altogether. But despite these efforts, we are not doing enough, as has been said. Achieving net zero ambition requires a much greater level of action at all levels, everywhere. Our net zero scenario outlined in the World Energy Transition Outlook presents a pathway towards 1.5 degree future, while keeping the achievement of UN Sustainable Development Goals in mind. I would like to highlight two key issues outlined by the scenario and go to my conclusion. Firstly, there are significant levels of energy-related investment needed in the wrong direction. Plans in place today call for investing almost 98 trillion of US dollar in hydrocarbon energy system over the coming 3 decades. It goes without saying that this misaligned investment greatly threatens our ability to meet net zero. Secondly, we need to focus more on the benefit and less on the costs. Transforming the energy system offers profound and far-reaching benefits to people and planet. Total energy jobs in 2050 will be more than 120 million under our net zero path. It is more than double today's 58 million. The global economic growth, marginalized communities can realize their economic potential, and people are able to live healthier and more productive lives. So, to conclude, there is no left for indecisiveness. We must accelerate the energy transition immediately and move from ambition to implementation through clear policy action and the firm commitment from both public and private institutions to investing in the future. Thank you, and I look forward for our discussion. Back to you, Anila. Thank you. Elima.
Thank you so much. And Joe, over to you.
Well, thank you, Elima, for having me in the discussion. And hello, everybody. And Jean-Bernard, thank you for your very kind words. Really, when I was listening to Jean-Bernard and Francesco, I mean, they basically addressed the real key facts already, where we are and what needs to be done. I mean, there is no point that, the future would not be renewable. I think that's been understood. And I also believe it's understood that the future will be electric if it comes to mobility or infrastructure or any other points. I think that's clear. The real question is, how do we get there? How do we really get this all done, what we've been promising and what we've been hearing from Paris COP21 and other commitments from companies and enterprises and the like. So I think that's the key question on execution, and how do we make sure that everybody participates? this is, I think, one of the key areas. If I go from my company's views on energy, the whole value chain of energy from generation to transmission to distribution and consumption, I mean, obviously, I would want to highlight three key elements. The first one is that the generation and transformation of renewables needs to continue at a much faster pace as we have been able to do that. And this is not just about generation, this is also about connecting, the generation points in a meaningful grid. Today, we are not really dependent on public subsidies anymore. If you do have the right places in terms of sun or wind, or of course also hydro, we see cost of about 2 cents per kilowatt hour, sometimes even below 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So those are economically feasible generation prices. So we need to just continue to execute on the plan. The second topic, and this is really, really relevant because I see that all over the place in Germany, in Europe, but also in major parts of any big economies, such as, for example, North America, United States, Canada, and elsewhere. We need to connect demand and supply. And this is now not just about smart grid, this is also about intelligent grid. So what do I mean by intelligent grid? Intelligent grid to me means that we have a demand-supply response so that we can see what is it that we have to expect in terms of demand and what can we do in order to supply that demand in an economically feasible way. This is really relevant, and this is where digitalization helps us if we go and connect the data from the utility all the way to the consumer and all the way up to things like weather forecasting if it comes to wind or solar energy. The third topic, of course, is since there is not always an agreement between demand and supply, third topic is we need to have an economically feasible storage. That's really relevant. So we need to continue to innovate on battery capacity, on storage, so that we are able, to get the energy produced into a reliable and affordable energy supply when we need it. However, having said that, I believe that conversion is equally important. So what do I mean by conversion? Conversion means what do we do with renewable energy being generated by the sun and by wind if it's not being needed and if the storage is full. And here I come to the hydrogen economy. This is where we need to put all hands on deck, all people on deck to continue to innovate and make hydrogen, green hydrogen, an economically feasible way. That is true also for synthetic fuels, because so far nobody can really imagine having large carriers, air carriers, fly on a sustainable way without a clean energy mix, and that's all about renewable energy, and that's all about renewable energy being converted into fuel. So that's, I believe, is what needs to be done. So if it comes to enterprises, large companies, from utilities to enterprises in the sector, I believe they all know what needs to be done. They all know what they need to do. What they really do need is that we have a globally agreeable system and framework on how we do price CO2, a reliable system, that we have a level playing field about sustainable products being exported to the world. And thirdly, of course, also an agreement on how we deal with the fact that data need to be available at any given point in time to anyone in order to maximize and optimize the value chain of electrification. So those are the areas where we do need the governments of this world, to give the framework. The companies will take care of the result, but we do need a legislation framework. I very much like the idea now from the European Union with the Green Deal. That's actually a notion to set this framework up. So whoever wants to do business in Europe has a certain set of rules in terms of renewable energy and emission. So that's a good announcement. Yet again, here we also do need to execute so that everyone in the world understands that. Second topic, of course, United States, North America. We very much welcome the new initiatives of the new administration to go much more dedicated after renewable. So that's something I do hope we can find a framework which lasts above and beyond the next 4 years, because innovation cycles in energy take longer than an election period. So that's why we need to have a reliable framework anywhere. And then last but not least, obviously, it's extremely desirable for anyone who plays a global world or plays in the global world. We need to include China. We need to include China. China today is responsible for 51% of the global coal-fired power plants. Next in line is Indonesia with about 16, and then comes India with about 7. The United States is number 6. Europe doesn't even exist in that map of coal-fired CO2 emission. So if we don't get this, 51% gorilla, so to speak, into our agreements and understanding, it's meaningless. For example, if Germany reduces its 2% emission to 1% of global emission, because all what you get is a deindustrialized country, but doesn't really move the needle in terms of CO2 emissions. So global approach, general set of rules for everyone doing business in that space, and then the companies will fix it because they have more to lose than an election. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much. Patrick, if you could close us out in terms of opening statements on how we translate ambition into action.
Thank you, Elima. I'm very happy to be here, and it's not easy to speak after all these important points, and I will not repeat it. What I would like to bring is 2 points, essentially. The first one is the fact that climate change is a risk. In companies, we are managing risk every day. We're discussing about financial risk, supply chain risk, and all different risks. But the main risk, finally the only risk for the next 10 years is climate change. And because it's an economic risk, it will create, and it create already disruption. We have disruptions in supply chain in Germany because of the flood in Germany and Belgium. It create decreasing productivity. It create access restriction to access to land. So it's an economic risk, and we have to take it into account as the first one. It's a social risk. We are in the middle. I'm not think we are at the end of the pandemic, and already the pandemic increased inequalities. What about the climate crisis where we are? What about if we have more catastrophes and more impact, recurrent impact in different places of the world? So I think that's one point, that yes, there is cost. Yes, there is opportunity, but there is a risk. And so we have to take all that into account. And the technologies are almost there. They will be improved because, as you mentioned, the companies will do their job. But I think we have to take that into account. I agree with the question of social acceptability that Jean-Bernard mentioned. But I do not agree with the fact that we have to be patient. When you read the IPCC report, we have 10 years of carbon budget. So 10 years is very small to keep a reasonable probability to respect the Paris Agreement. So we need to act now, and we need to act together. There is place for everybody. There is place for big utilities. There is place for suppliers. There is place for private IPP like us. And I think we have all a role in this energy transition. Our role as an IPP is to produce reliable green electricity at the lowest cost as possible, to organically create new projects, because we will need so much project. We'll need project onshore wind, offshore wind, we will need solar, we'll need floating offshore. Yes, we will need hydrogen for transport and all those things. So there is a lot of possibility for the companies, and for social acceptability, we need to do it with environmental, social, and governance criteria. On the utilities, you have spoken about it. I will just point out one point. The grid will have, and the electricity system and the electricity market will have to change. And you mentioned it, the structure of the cost of capital of wind and solar is completely different than fossil fuels. So we need to change the market design. I agree with that. At the level of government, first of all, has to give a vision. You know, when you know that in the next 10 years, you will go typically like New York State, you want to go to 70% of green electricity. You have a vision. You know that you can develop projects, and that one day or another, if you optimize your project and you develop them correctly, they will be economically viable, and you will be able to make new projects. And an important point also for government is fair transition. Inequalities and increase during the pandemic. Inequalities should not increase with the energy transition. They should be reduced. So energy savings and tax and market design should be rethink, and quickly, not in 10 years. It should be done now. And finally, I think companies, customers, company who are demanding electricity, has also to do their job. To do their job for their customers, for their stakeholders, for their shareholders, to reduce the risk. And I would like to finish to say ESG is not a marketing question. You see a lot of marketing using to say we will be net zero in 2030, but the company does not know if it will be there in 2030. They have to act now. It's not marketing. It's a way of leading.
Well, thank you so much. We only have about 20 minutes for questions, and so much came out of these opening statements. I almost have to bucket my questions. And so the first one I was really thinking about that all of you spoke about was the need to have this sort of global framework, global consensus. And my question is, how optimistic are you as we head into COP26 that we actually are going to get the necessary global framework? Joe, you mentioned the really important issue of China. How realistic do you think it is to get these commitments from China? Patrick, you mentioned the issue of, the COVID crisis. I mean, do you have confidence coming out of the way the international community handled the COVID crisis that there is this ability to come together to come up with a clear framework for addressing climate change? So I think I'm going to go in the reverse order in terms of actually the likelihood of this framework. So Patrick, if you could start with that question.
Yeah, I don't know if I should be confident or not. What I will do is repeat what I was saying and repeat it to my employee and to everywhere I can. We have 10 years of budget in front of us. When you have finished your budget, you have no more money. When you have finished, when you will have produced too much carbon, there will be more catastrophes. And so I think this is important. On the global issue, we have to work as a company. Practically, we have to work on our supply chain and ask suppliers to what is their level of carbon in the solar panel they are producing, in the wind turbine we are buying from them, and that thing. I'm not an expert of global negotiation. I know that it's not easy. I'm confident with what I hear yesterday from Mark Carney about financials. I think the financial community is understanding this question of risk. So probably this will move the needle, because if finance is going the right way, is going to the right place, this will change the things. It means banks has to act, pension fund has to act, and all these big people who are finally lending money to us or investing money in our companies.
So, Joe, can I go back to your point though, because you really raised this issue of this global framework? I mean, again, how optimistic are you about this? What are the big challenges? And can you talk about the issue a little more on China?
Well, look, time will tell. I mean, obviously, the good news is that the sense of urgency, has made it into people's minds and policy making everywhere. That's the good news. So nobody, neither in China nor in Germany or United States or elsewhere, I believe, is denying that climate change is a major issue and that all those weather issues, eventually result from climate change impact. So that's the good news. The bad news is there's just too much at stake in terms of national interests. So this is China today has about 400,000 megawatt of power being produced by coal-fired power plants. And we must not forget electricity is a critical infrastructure. It's a strategic infrastructure, such as telecommunication, 5G or what have you. So this is something, you don't want your country to be dependent on things which a third party controls. And China has a lot of coal. So they would likely not be willing to put all their eggs into baskets on the weather or maybe gas, natural gas from the Russian president, which, has just been finished on the pipeline. So they will always look into this also as a national interest. National interest for economy and national interest for strategic topics in terms of how to protect critical infrastructure. So that's the big, I think, issue. Now, on the other hand, though, and this could be a potential sort of alignment, everybody, and especially China, is very dependent on global trade. China is quite a net exporter of goods and services, obviously most into the United States, but also into Europe. So if there's a common and a joint set of rules about, what emission, and I think Francesco somebody has mentioned that we look at level 1, level 2, and level 3 of the goods being produced and what footprint they have. If there's a global framework on what the goods and services need to look like in order to be exported into the world, I believe we've come a long way. And those rules are much better than all those commitments about 2050 or 2060 or 2030 being, CO2 neutral or whatever, just because you buy a lot of certificates. That's not gonna help the world. Buying certificates. What helps the world is to net reduce emission. So I'm very excited about COP26 because I think time is of the essence. Interest levels are high, but nobody can afford not to participate because everybody is dependent on global trade. So I think the key question is, will the community be able to lay out a set of rules on what products need to look like in order to make them competitive in the world? And then again, that will call for a global framework of CO2 pricing.
Francesco, I wonder if you could take up the whole issue of COP26 as well. And as you head into this, crucial set of meetings, where do you think we are in terms of getting the necessary global framework? And to pick up on Joe's point as well, how essential is it to have a price for carbon? And we do see, for example, resistance, in the United States to having a price for carbon, at least from the US Congress. Like, how important is this in terms of the global framework? Can we get to net zero without a price for carbon?
I don't think. And if I can say frankly, I think it's not necessary. I don't think that we can have a global framework on setting the price of carbon, because every country may have a shadow cost of carbon that is different from country to country and sometimes from region to region. So we have, in my point of view, and this is the only point of view that I can share with Joy, we have not to give our expectation to Glasgow to have something as a global agreement or something, because this will never be possible. And I think we have also to stop thinking that the COP as a negotiating place. I hope that this COP make clear that now we have to concentrate more than building a political document, very complex, on where are the barriers, where are the difficulties, where are the problems linked to the global trade that can make the world leading to the objective of the Paris Agreement. So what is encouraging, Lima? I don't know how are you used to in the past to listen meeting like this, but it's the first time that lead CEO or lead companies, I see that the difference between our opinion here don't exist. We are all believing that the next decade is key. We all believe in the sense of urgency. In some way, this global energy system based on renewables is putting all of us together. And I think that this will be some of the result of the COP26. And my hope is that will be the last COP where we still have an article of the Paris Agreement to be negotiated in terms of administrative rules, and share 100% of what Joe just said, so I don't repeat it. I hope that will change the life of the COP. The COP must be a place where private, public come together, try to understand where they are failing, and what could be the best route to follow. If we change this attitude and concentrate our working life on the implementation, the practical means and way to make things possible, I think COP26 will get its result. And I will also, and I will finish, and I don't want to be too long, also pose attention to the high-level dialogue on energy in New York, where I hope many commitments are coming. One I know on green hydrogen that could be very important because many companies join together on that. I think these two meetings, hopefully, in my point of view, will change the point of view and concentrate on implementation. This is the reason why the next General Assembly of ARENA, the second week of January last year, will have as overarching theme from ambition to implementation, the next decade. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you so much.
Sorry if I jump in, but I think what Francesco said is perfectly right, and I would sign it up for it in a heartbeat. The only one issue we always need to have in mind, there's 480 coal-fired power plants currently either under construction or in planning. So somebody must have gotten something wrong. So there's not going to be a COP26 if those 480 coal-fired power plants are being built. Maybe we should also consider the interest of the developing countries. That's, I think, something which we really, really need to take into consideration when we have COP26, because the developing economies or the people will say, wait a moment, you industrial countries, you polluted the whole world, you got rich and wealthy, you go on vacation and have this and that and drive a Daimler and a Mercedes. Now tell me, why shouldn't we, strive for the same thing? And that's a legitimate answer. That is, I believe, one of the key questions also on COP26, inclusion of the developing economies. Thank you. Sorry for jumping in, Fabian. No, I hope you...
No, absolutely. And Jean-Bernard, over to you with that as well, on the issue of energy access as well, and how that's going to play out in terms of COP26 debates.
Yes, thank you. I believe the various topics that have just been described, the various issues are all of them are key, whether it's unbalanced situation between emerging economies that maybe won't have time to get the benefit of fossil-based growth, and jealously complaining with advanced economies that they got the best of the two worlds. They got the growth, and they could use the fossils when they needed them. And I think also what was said around the fact that it's not because you buy your certificate that you decarbonize. I think that should be probably at the forefront of all our papers. I would like to say I'm mildly optimistic about what you said. What is the likelihood of a global framework? Are we going to achieve global carbon pricing? I think we've made a lot of progress when we hear leaders speak. I think we're probably halfway in their mindset. Do they really believe what they say? And I think we're close to nowhere in terms of actions. They haven't really started anything really very specific. But it's good. They are now speaking about it more and more. And obviously the change in the United States leadership a year ago is useful, although I have to say we haven't seen much in terms of action at this stage. And of course, one of the speakers was referring to national consideration. I would like to say that having elections every 4 or 5 years in each and every country, if not more often, when there is an early replacement of political leaders, is not going to help to have a long-term view. And we live that every time. I would also like to add that if I look at the largest 4 economies in the world, on 3 different continents, I think that none of them is a good example of what should be done. I don't think any of the 4 leading economies in the world is going to lead the way now. I heard Joe saying that, one of them, economy number 4, Germany, is only 1% of global emissions. Maybe that's right, but I think we should set the example when we live in a large and rich, wealthy economies. So, I'm a bit. I'm not too optimistic. I think, as I said, we are all impatient. Of course, we are all impatient because we know time is of the essence. But at the same time as having to organize our capital allocation, our human priorities, our R&D priorities in various companies, we really have to look out for what's being done, and what's being really done is not aligned with what is being spoken of. And I would like to go back to what I said. We need to look at taxation. We need to look at specific sector policies. We need to look at market design. I would like to add, we need to look at innovation. There is still a lot of innovation that needs to be performed. I think cost of renewables is still too expensive because, don't forget, the renewables today are mostly not produced where you need this renewable energy. So the costs are low, but not where you need them. And when you have to add problems with intermittency and localization, of course, it's a very different story. I think we look at optimizing storage cost, that was mentioned, whether it's batteries, whether it's the hydrogen value chain with a specific focus on electrolyzers and on hydrogen storage devices, whether it is the general ability to manage the grids in a more flexible way, including, for instance, pump storage, which is overlooked for hydro mostly. I think a lot of the storage cost innovation focus is not there today. And then I would like to end by something which maybe I should have started with, which is decentralized innovation. And I strongly believe that we need to focus on managing supply and demand in the environment which is close to the consumer. We need to gain 50% in energy efficiency in the next 30 years. We need to digitize. We need to use artificial intelligence tools. We need to deliver heat pumps to the world. We need new processes for energy-intensive industries. We need to really get the benefits of those tens of billions of smart meters or hundreds of millions of smart meters all over in the world, and many more. So I think we still have a lot to do in terms of innovation to really sustain what needs to be done. But in a nutshell, I am patient because I have no choice. I'm sorry for the person who said he's impatient, but we don't have a choice because right now the framework is not there and it is being built too slowly. Thank you.
Well, one thing we don't have in this session is a lot of additional time. And so to sort of bring it to a close, I'm wondering if I could just ask each speaker to talk about, the one or two, we've spent a lot of time talking about innovation. I mean, what you see as the most important, new technology that has recently, come on the scene that can advance the net zero goals? Or what is one that is in development that you are sort of most excited about that could help us achieve these net zero goals? So maybe I will start with Patrick. If you could talk about your innovation pick.
Yeah, I think the main innovation should be on the network. We mentioned it many times. The fact that wind turbine is producing when there is wind and solar is producing when the sun is shining, it's clear. But it's the cost is going down, and we have to find a solution to be sure that the system is working. It goes through smart meters, it goes to the way we are, utilities are operating the network, it goes to the way we will be charging our car and all those things. So I think all this information between production and to bring production and demand at the same time is something we cannot avoid it. So this is important. There are also innovation about the way lines are used and optimized. When there is wind, the lines are refrigerated by the wind more than when there is no wind. And at that time, the good news, production is important from wind turbines. So you have a lot of things on the network, and this should not be a hurdle. It's a question, but when Kennedy said we will go on the moon in 10 years, he didn't know how to do it, and so we can and we should do it.
Joe, your innovation pick.
Yeah, the innovation center is between generation and consumption. I totally agree. And there's two areas there. First is the demand response, connectivity. And the second topic is conversion from unused electrification into, I would say, hydrogen at this point in time.
Excellent.
Because today they are far off from economically feasible methods like electrolyzer. We need to find an economically feasible way of conversion. And then we have a major milestone, because then airplanes can fly with synthetic fuel.
Francesca?
A full percent, I agree with the two previous speakers. You know, in our World Energy Transition Outlook, we make clear that renewables, green hydrogen, and sustainable energy will be the energy system of the future. So it's very important that we use and connect. So the intelligent grid has been called, the system is working together. I completely agree with this, making clear that we don't need invention. We need innovation. On this respect, Elima, allow me to say briefly that Arena is happy, and I have been very happy to be with these CEOs in this discussion. We have opened Arena to the private. We signed an agreement with Siemens. I will be happy to find a way to collaborate more closely with EDF and Boralec. We are here ready to receive your interest in case you may be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean-Bernard, can you close out our session with your top innovation pick?
My top innovation pick, Elima, will be nuclear fusion. I know it's not for the short term, but we have to be optimistic.
And with that, I would like to bring to a close this excellent session on reinventing energy. I think we have all learned a tremendous amount from these speakers. And with that, Catherine, I will hand it back to you.